Blog Talk Radio.
Gentlemen, it seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations Team.
To another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. Today's show, we're going to be talking about alien graves. And on the line with me today, I have Brent, Nick, and myself. And we are going to be on the air for about an hour. So how are you doing today, Brent?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing good. Just excited for the trip to Ely here on Wednesday. Had to think there for a minute. But yeah, I'd say, Nick, did you want to start us off with some news for this show?
Sure. Well, I have a few stories here that are pretty interesting. The first story I call the resurrection story. Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care doctor and the director of resuscitation research at Stony Brook University School of Medicine, has written a new book discussing ways in which people can be resuscitated after they previously would have been considered clinically dead. Parnia's book, Erasing Death, The Science That is Rewriting the Boundaries Between Life and Death, was recently featured on the Today Show. Quote, the advances in the last 10 years have shown that it's only after a person dies they can turn into a corpse. Then their brain starts to die, close quote, Parnia told host Savannah Guthrie. Parnia's suggestion is not new. In fact, as researcher Jan Bondison notes in his 2001 book, Buried Alive, The Terrifying History of Our Most Primal Fear, in 1787, the French doctor François Thérèse published a book in which he stated his conviction that most people did not die until sometime after the onset of the traditional signs of death. Throughout most of history, medical knowledge of anatomy has been poor and indirect, partly because of fear and taboos against cutting open corpses. Finding the boundary between life and death has concerned humans for millennia. Fears of premature burial obsessed mainly in the Victorian era, and in fact some caskets were equipped with tubes and equipment leading to the surfaces so that the bells and flags could be raised to alert groundskeepers in case the dead awoke. What do you think about that, Jared?
I know that they used to have those bells that when people would die, they just in case something were to happen and they weren't dead, they could ring the bells. That's bizarre. What do you think, Brent?
I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, just like there's been a lot of cases like, with like voodoo and stuff where they're like zombies and they could come back to life. But I think that's a little interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that there was a study done back in the 90s where there was a brain-dead vegetable who had been in a car accident. A person that had been in a car accident became a vegetable, and they hooked up some scanners to her brain, and they asked her questions like, in your mind, picture what a car looks like, and et cetera, et cetera. And then they strap the same sensors to a fully functioning person, and they ask the person the same questions. And after they compared the EKG readings from the experiment, they found out that the person that was fully functional and normal had the same brain readings as the vegetable person. So even though a person is considered brain dead, there's still a lot going on that we don't really know about. And apparently this doctor says even after a person dies on the medical table, it still may be possible to restore them to life, even though that they've been deemed brain dead and their organs have stopped working, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty crazy. Apparently there was a recent UFO sighting in Yorkville. I think this is in New York, I believe. Doesn't give a state in the story. However, there's a man who wishes to remain anonymous that reported that he, his wife, and his daughter sighted an unidentified flying object from their home just before 8 p.m. Saturday. The family lives near the Fox River north of Yorkville. They said they saw two lights moving east by northeast with colors ranging from red, orange, yellow, and pink. The lights were together, either one in front of the other, either one in front of the other or side by side and going at a pretty good clip in the eastern sky, the man said. The man reported what he saw to the Mutual UFO Network, or Our Buddies MUFON, which included it on their website. After the original story ran in the Beacon News, another area resident, also wishing to remain anonymous, said he might have an explanation. A pilot basically said that what the man saw was space junk. He said that during his decades of experience of flying commercial airliners that he himself has seen similar lights in the sky of stuff falling from space into the atmosphere. And that's what a lot of the people are calling it now. What do you think about that, Jared?
So the guy, he said that the guy seen a UFO and reported it to MUFON, and then they said it was space junk? Is that what you were saying?
The news contacted a pilot, they were doing a story about it. The local ones were doing a story about it, and they interviewed a retired commercial flight pilot, and he said that based on his own professional opinion that it was space junk because he had seen similar phenomena throughout his career.
Well, I think the average person knows the difference between space junk and a UFO, though, if you ask me. I mean...
Yeah.
Well, Brent doesn't know.
I mean, overall, it's hard to make a final judgment based on just this man's story because we don't have any idea of what really happened. It might really just be space junk. I mean, most UFOs aren't aliens. Most UFOs aren't flying saucers. Majority of UFOs are either man-made or something else.
Well, actually, Bill Burns,
here's one more for you, Jared.
He said that only like 5 or 10% of UFO sightings are actually UFO aliens from space. Most of them, they think, are explained by man-made UFOs or other different things.
Yeah, that's what Stanton Friedman said a lot.
And then the other ones could be explained for Brent. He's the other 10%. So anyways, Nick, you can go into your next article.
Okay, here's the next one called Telepathy. Neuroscientists at Duke University have proven that telepathic communication between rats is not only possible, but can be done across continents. Similar experiments are already being tested on monkeys. The discovery, published Thursday in the journal Scientific Reports, is the first confirmed brain-to-brain communication between animals. In the experiment, two rats who could not see each other were trained to press certain levers in exchange for a food pellet. The first rat was given a visual cue that told it which of two levers to push, which correspond to a lever in the other rat's chamber, The other rat did not receive a visual cue, but instead received brain waves, transmitted through arrays of electrodes between the rat's brains that informed it which lever to push. If the second rat pressed the correct lever, the first encoder rat would receive an additional award, giving the rats incentive to work together. The second rat pressed the correct lever 70% of the time. That's pretty interesting. They strapped up these computers to a couple rats, and one rat would press a button to give itself a food pellet. Then that electrical signal somehow would be transmitted to the other rat on another continent, where that rat would press the same button and receive a food pellet. And like I said, it was done right 70% of the time.
Well, I think that if they actually keep this going, they could have something, I don't know if you could use it as a weapon or if you could use it for good and bad reasons, but if you did it on humans, that would be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, what if they get this down to the point to where you could control other, like where you could control your cat or your dog or whatever type of thing? Yeah,
this is pretty crazy tech stuff.
Does that mean if Brent really wanted to, like Brent would be able to like control you or me or do stuff like that if they really got it down?
Yeah, basically.
But Nick, the other thing, you said one rat was trying to send signals to the other, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that Mike Baca was sending signals to Justin, one rat to the other?
Yeah. Oh,
what do you think, Brent?
I think that could have a lot of, I guess, implementation by the military. Like if they really wanted to perfect something like that, it could be used for like warfare, or it's not really, like really you wouldn't really need that for like daily use or anything like that. Like why would someone need to say, like, control your dog or something, be like, oh, you need to go outside. Let me just telepathically tell my dog, hey, you need to go outside when, you know, I mean, the dog will know you're talking to it, though, but, you know, it'll be like, well, I would think at first the animal or a person would be confused, like, at first, but then once, you know, you need, like test lab rats and stuff like that, like, they're going through all these rigorous tests and being probed and everything, and you know, there's too much, I guess, at stake. Like, I mean, even your own thoughts wouldn't really be your own thoughts anymore.
Yeah.
Because then someone else would, like, read your own thoughts and be like, or tell you what to do, and you would think that they were your thoughts, but they're not. Someone could just be telling you what to do, and subconsciously you're like, oh, well, I need to do this, but it's really someone else telling you what to do.
Yeah, it's pretty scary to think of what the government especially could do with this type of technology. Speaking of the government, Jerry, here's one last story that you'll like.
All right.
So, the first guy who uses a weapon to bring down a drone that's hovering over his house is going to become a folk hero in this country. So said commentator Charles Krauthammer, a.k.a. the Grinch, on Fox News in May last year, after the U.S. Federal the FAA said that drones will soon be licensed for law enforcement and commercial surveillance work. Krauthammer's words seem to have captured the mood of the nation. Privacy fears are sparking a backlash against the use of drones in civilian airspace. Seattle's police force was forced to abandon its drone program last month, following anger from residents. Meanwhile, Virginia has imposed a 2-year moratorium on the use of drones by police, and at least 13 other states are now deliberating similar anti-drone legislation. But some privacy advocates have gone beyond lobbying their local counselor. Online discussion groups have sprung up about what kind of drone countermeasures could prevent privacy invasion from the air. Their ideas range from the absurd, wearing drone camera-proof clothing, or using stunt kites to tangle their rotors, or to be more plausible, jamming radio control frequencies or shooting the drones out of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the rest of the article goes and talks about how different people are saying they're going to shoot at the drones when they fly overhead, and one person even said that they were going to get a rocket launcher and shoot down these drones with a rocket launcher. So apparently they're not very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And in light of a memo that was uncovered a couple months ago that said that basically the President of the United States could order a drone strike on anybody he felt was a threat to the United States, this topic of military drone use has actually found its way into the mainstream media. You know, most of the time it was just people like us talking about these drones, and people would laugh at us and say, oh, that's just a government conspiracy, and the government would never do that, and this, and look, what the things that people like us talked about a year ago are now a very, very scary reality.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be funny.
I need to keep those out of our business, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, definitely. We just got done talking about mind reading technology, and now we're talking about drones that can fly in the air and watch your every move. So, invasion of privacy is an understatement if they can read your thoughts and fly around your house and watch you do everything. You want any drones flying around your house, Brent?
Well, for me, it's kind of a different story because I live really close to a NASA test center, so I usually see drones flying around, and usually B-52s and stuff like that. But
you gonna take
what's that?
I was like, you gonna take your Mosin Nagant and shoot one down? Get some target practice?
No, I don't think I want to be shooting at a multi-million-dollar surveillance drone.
Okay, Joe, what type of news stories do you have?
I'm actually going to keep mine for the next show on the 9th.
Okay.
Oh, and one thing I'd like to note, March is officially our UFO and Alien month for our radio show. All this month through March, we're going to be talking about UFO-related topics and aliens, except for a Robert Bartholomew Champ the Lake Monster interview. That's the only one that's not aliens this whole month. I thought that was interesting to know. Well, we're going to get started with today's topic, which is the gray aliens. And before we get involved and started with all this stuff, I have a little bit of history on gray aliens that I'm going to be talking about throughout the show. And then Brent had some theories and different things that he wanted to talk about. All right, well, I'm pretty sure most of our listeners know what a gray alien is, but in case they don't, here it is. Grays are typically depicted as dark gray-skinned humanoid beings that possess reduced forms of or completely lack external human organs such as noses, ears, and sex organs. Their bodies are usually depicted as being elongated, having a small crest, or lacking in muscular definition or visible skeletal structure. Their legs are shorter and jointed differently from what would be expected in a human. Their limbs are often depicted as proportionally different from a human's. Grays are depicted as having unusually large heads in proportion to their bodies. They're depicted as having no hair anywhere, including the face, and no noticeable outer ears or noses, but only small openings and orifices for ears and nostrils. They're depicted as having very small mouths and very large black eyes with no pupil or iris in them. Like I was saying, the Greys, they're supposed to be a certain race or type of alien. I'd say, Brent, did you want to talk a little bit about the description, or do you think that's good enough?
Well, I think that would be sufficient enough.
I have an interesting poll. Before we get started, I know Nick and Brent have theories and different things. They took a poll around the world, It says grays make up about 50% of alien encounters in Australia, 43% in the United States, 90% in Canada, 67% in Brazil, 20% in Europe, and around 12% in the UK. So they make up around half or more of all the alien encounters around the world, at least in those continents. So whatever these things are, they're being cited quite often by abductees or people that see UFO landings and things like that. Nick, did you want to add anything onto that?
No, not at this time.
Well, the mainstream media in 1965 brought grays into international attention with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. I was going to say, Nick, can you talk a little bit about what happened with Betty and Barney Hill and the star map and all that?
Okay, yeah. Well, back in the, was it the 1940s, Jeremy?
1965 is when it went to the mainstream media.
1955, okay. It was back in the 50s. A couple 60s.
Yes.
Wait. Okay. Okay. Back in the 1960s, there was a couple, Betty Barney Hill, a black man and a white woman, that were driving on this back country road in New Hampshire, and they saw a weird object on the side of the road which was glowing and doing a variety of things. So they decided to get closer to it and inspect it. When they got closer to it, they lost consciousness and they awoke to find themselves inside of a weird craft laying on a table. And I mean, they were barely conscious, but they reported seeing these weird alien creatures, which matched the description of grays. And then finally they found themselves put back down on Earth, and then they were interviewed and scrutinized very, very thoroughly when they brought the story to the public. And Betty Hill drew up a map of certain constellations and star formations that at the time were not known to exist. And later on it was found out that they really do exist. So the story is very, very interesting, and the very fact that she, just a normal, average housewife, could point out, or precisely point out and map star formations that even the leading astronomers at the time didn't even know about, with the most advanced scientific technology of the day, is simply amazing, and I think really gives credibility to her and now her deceased husband, Barney's story.
Well, yeah, what I think Nick forgot to mention is a lot of the facts were also given forward during hypnosis and different things like that, too. And the star map that Betty drew, apparently one of the aliens told her that that's where they came from. So, anyway, one of the theories, the main theory out there is that they're a type of alien breed or an alien species, I guess would be the proper way to say it. But yeah, Brent, I was going to say, is there any ways that you want to start saying some of your theories, and then I'll occasionally throw out some old history about the Greys?
Oh, okay. Well, one theory I've been really thinking about lately was maybe in a sense that the gray aliens could be just us, but more or we're in their image, as I guess some people would say. But they're instead of traveling light years and light years away and coming from different star systems and all that jazz, but more or less that they're actually time travelers, like actually coming, because no one really ever sees, like, oh yeah, look at that star just keeps getting closer and closer, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's here, it's right here, and it's a UFO. But, you know, like, most of the time, I guess you could say they kind of, the way I see it is sometimes, you know, everyone gets, like, when they're abducted and then they recount what actually happened during their abduction, they're more or less doing, I guess, with their testing, like, that they do on us, like what are they testing for? Like, like, that's kind of strange. I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, any kind of, like us trying to, like, we find a new species of animal and then we try to find out more about it, we start doing tests on it. So, I mean, that could just be their way of not testing us, but seeing how we're evolving and how, like, our pollution and, like, the way our way of life is affecting our bodies. And I guess that's their type of way of, I guess their type of EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Just to see.
So you were saying that. Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Brent. Oh, I was saying, what you're saying is that one theory says that they're from the future, and maybe they're doing these tests on individuals from the present day to figure out maybe how they evolved or what their past was, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Similar to that, yeah. Like, they're trying to, like, say maybe something went wrong in the future, so they're trying to go back into the past and, I guess, run these tests on us and possibly the planet. Like, we don't know if there have been instances where, you know, we see them going into lakes and, like, you know, underground caverns and stuff like that, and some people say that they have underground bases and stuff. Maybe they're that's their way or something of going to and from the past without being really noticeable, you know? Yeah. Because if, you know, if you were to just pop up and say, hey, I'm right here, right on, like, you're supposedly in, like, on top of the White House, like where the White House used to be, and then you're like, all right, we're going to go into the past, and then boom, you're on top of the White House in the past, and that's not going to look good. So you might want to try to do it somewhere secluded where no one's really going to see this. I guess some people say they see bright flashes of light, like for an instant. So I guess it would be more secretive for them to do something like that.
Now, what do you think of that theory, Nick?
I think it's interesting. I mean, something pops up in my mind right away. We could have missing links then of what our species is now in between the grays and the future. Like, aren't there people, Jeremy, that live on Earth that share some physical features, such as the eyes and the fingers and the limbs of the grays, that could potentially be the next step of evolution, where we would then, you know, pass on those genetic traits on to our children, which will eventually turn into grays. Like, for example, you know, we found the skull of the Star Child a long time ago, and a lot of people say that's an alien-human hybrid, and maybe it's not a hybrid, maybe it's just part of the gene pool, and it's the next step of evolution towards the human race becoming the gray alien race instead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, well, I know that some people, like you were saying, some traits, even in the animal kingdom, if some kind of trait helps the animal survive, that eventually, with evolution, that there's a possibility that maybe those traits will become, I don't know what to say, they will become natural for the species. So maybe for some reason down the road, maybe we need the, I don't know, maybe we need the long fingers for something, or maybe we evolved for some reason. Maybe the habitat on the planet changed and the people changed. Maybe for some reason we will evolve into that. Is that's what you mean, Nick?
Yeah, well, like, for example, we were talking earlier in the show about how much technology has increased, and human reliance on technology has greatly increased as well. Perhaps due to the rapid advance of technology, humans will, you know, get things like loss of body hair and increased intelligence and less physical strength and whatnot due to the over-reliance on technology. That fact will just push us in an evolutionary direction where we become more like the gray aliens.
Well, we have a question coming from our Facebook. The person is asking, while we're talking about the Star Child, they wanted me to bring up the theory that maybe the Greys created us and they put us here. Well, what's weird about that is we're talking about the Star Child skull. In case people listening don't know what this is, in Mexico, I don't recall the day. I think it was like in the mid-century or maybe a little after 70s or something. Anyways, so I found this skull. It looks just like a gray alien. Pretty much. Close enough. But anyways, so I found this skull. There's no other bones nearby, just a skull. And this skull has been analyzed by dozens of scientists and dozens of amateurs, all sorts of people. So they can't really put their finger on what this skull is. Some people say that it might just be a deformed human skull, maybe a skull that was mutilated for some reason. But most scientists say they don't know what it is. So this skull may be proof that the Greys put us here. It was found in a remote mountain region. I was going to say maybe they co-inhabited the planet with us at one point in time, and maybe one of them died or was killed or something, and that's why the skull was there. I don't know, Nick, what do you think of the theory about the Greys putting us here or them engineering us? Maybe we were some type of experiment or a project of theirs.
Well, the theory in and of itself gets into things like ancient astronauts and whatnot. There should be a whole other show in itself, but to basically keep it short, the theory in and of itself, I would say, next to religious theories, makes a whole lot of sense, much more than what scientists are giving us right now, because according to modern science, billions of years ago, I think around 65 billion years ago, we had the primordial soup. The Earth was nothing but a boiling mass of rock and soils and whatnot. It was just a boiling rock out there floating in space. And then a lightning bolt struck a rock or struck the primordial soup, and somehow DNA was created. It randomly came together, and then after the DNA randomly came together, then it randomly transformed into bacteria. Then that bacteria randomly mutated into the first frog, and then the frog went on to land, and then, we've evolved like that until this day. I mean, I think there's a big glaring problem with that part of evolutionary theory that states that there was nothing but a pool of chemicals where a lightning bolt struck that created DNA. That sounds like I don't even know if science fiction would say something like that. So besides,
I think it could be plausible.
It could be plausible, yeah. So besides the thought of maybe a higher power like God or some gods or something making us, maybe we were made by some beings from another galaxy. Maybe we are made in God's image and God is a gray alien.
Well, even Ridley Scott, the director and movie maker, he even made, if you haven't seen the movie Prometheus, for our listeners out there, they even based their movie, I guess it was some big blockbuster hit recently, they even based that movie off of that theory that maybe aliens invented us. So the theory's out there. People think about it more than you realize. I mean, I don't know. I thought that was pretty interesting. When I first seen that movie, I was thinking about that. I remember me and Nick were talking about it. We put the movie on pause and we're debating alien theories for a half hour before the movie even started.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
So what do you think of that theory, Brent? Or the Star Child school?
Well, you mean about what you were saying earlier about them creating us?
Yeah, and the evidence of the skull.
Well, with my opinion, sorry. So it's kind of a, like, funny to say, a gray area, but
your gray basket.
Yeah, but it's just, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different theories, like them creating us, like that's definitely plausible. I mean, they could have. The way I kind of see it is, I guess they created us in a, I guess, not so smart, I guess you could say. Because, I mean, if you look at gray aliens and you look at us, I mean, there's a big gap there. I mean, they're like, what, 3 feet tall, big eyes, small nose, small mouth. I mean, just like in the movie, what was that, Fire in the Sky? Like we see them.
You mean Soul Plane?
Yeah.
Movie Soul Plane.
But they it could be like their suit. Like they could look almost. We could look really similar to them, but when we see them, they have these suits on, these gray, I guess you could call them astronaut suits, like what we have, is the way we see them. But they really, have the same kind of skin color, I guess you could say, like a, not pinkish, but I guess like a tannish pink. But it's just very, very vague, and I wish we knew more about it than just theories.
Well, I have a couple of interesting theories on here. One theory says that grays may be government-engineered creatures of some sort, or maybe they are made by the government. Either some person says that they're a form of mind control, like maybe they don't exist in reality, but they're somehow they make your mind think that they're there. I don't really believe in that, but that's what some theories say. Maybe that they're engineered from Earth. But although that doesn't really explain the UFO theory, that is pretty interesting. The other thing I was going to tell Nick and Brent was, sorry, I got confused here. The Roswell UFO crash, people say, was one of the first times that the actual grays were talked about. Sorry, I hear a bunch of kids outside. People said that the beings from Roswell had oversized head and slanted eyes, but scant facial features during and after the incident. This was in 1947, but it wasn't really brought into light until the 70s and 80s by Stanton Friedman, who was on our show recently. But anyways, the only thing is these people, or these beings, most of the time when you think of the grays, you think of really tall, skinny-looking creatures. These ones were short and childlike. So I do think that the grays come in different sizes. I don't think they're necessarily small. They're not necessarily short. Although most of the time they're... What would you guys say?
Oh, well, Jeremy, see, you're making one big mistake already off the get-go by talking about them as gray aliens. You're investigating by color. Haven't you learned not to do that yet, Jeremy?
Oh, yeah.
Can investigate by color. But, I don't think that gray aliens are government manufactured at all, because then the fact that they're spotted in UFOs during abductions would totally be nonsensical if they were manufactured by the government. Secondly, as has been pointed out in many Giorgio Waka, whatever his name is, just call him Giorgio. Okay. In many Giorgio ancient alien specials, there are depictions of beings that look very similar to gray aliens found in cave paintings and hieroglyphics all across the world from ancient times till today.
Mm-hmm.
So if these things exist, they've been around for a long time, and they have been talking to us for a long time.
Yeah. Well, something I was thinking This is a theory I'm reading right now, and it's also a caller on our radio show told us a story. They said maybe the Greys are maybe they're mechanical of some sort. They're almost like I don't know what you call, like a robot or a cyborg. Nick, would you like to tell the story about what the caller said about Antarctica and their vision? It was on one of the shows. I don't know if you remember that one.
I think I remember vaguely.
Well, I'll just say it. There was an artist that did an artwork for the show Ancient Aliens, and she said that she had a vision, she thinks maybe it was an abduction, but it's probably a vision of gray aliens. I guess there was some sort of mechanical, or they were robots of some sort, and she said that they had a cave in Antarctica that the Greys lived in, or they were being manufactured there by the gray aliens. Or not the gray aliens, some other type of aliens. Do you remember that, Brent or Nick?
I do remember. Yeah, I remember I was in my bedroom in Cleveland, my apartment in Cleveland when we were doing that show, and she said Jesus was a gray or something.
Bill M. Tracer, he was on the show at the time, and he had some pretty good theories on the Greys. I was kind of disappointed that he would make a good guest for the show.
Yeah, I know, he'd make a pretty good guest. He was rather knowledgeable about these type of things.
Well, we have about 18 minutes left in the show. We're going to go on a quick commercial break, and when we get back, we are going to talk more about gray aliens and theories behind them. You're listening to BFP Radio.
The foaming cleanser, clean pots and pans, just like a whiz.
Ajax cuts grease faster than any other leading cleanser.
Use the paying the elbow tax when you start cleaning with Ajax.
Ajax really polishes as it cleans.
So use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Flush the dirt right down the drain.
My gosh, they're right.
I love Basso, it's rich in chocolate tea. Chocolate-flavored Basso is mighty good for me. Mama puts it in my milk for extra energy. Basso gives me iron and sunshine vitamin D. Oh, I love Basso, that's the drink for me.
And we're back on BFP Radio after, gotta love those retro commercials. Anyways, I was doing a little bit of research there for a minute, and I found out that H.G. Wells, the writer, he said that in the 1880s that he had seen a gray alien or had heard about one, and that's what he basically based his War of the Worlds book on, was some kind of an alien vision or an alien story that he had heard. And he said he briefly describes aliens resembling the Greys brought down to Earth as food by the antagonists in the popular novel War of the Worlds. He said that they have gray skin, big heads, large black eyes, and wasp stings. So that's in his book, The First Men in the Moon and War of the Worlds both describe that. So, what do you think, Nick?
I'm vaguely familiar with H.G. Wells. He's a rather renowned writer, obviously, for the War of the Worlds, and then the whole fiasco that followed the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. But I didn't know he had an alien encounter, or an alleged alien encounter. That's rather interesting to learn. I'd have to do more research about that to really get into some good, deep analysis of it, though.
Well, here's something interesting. So, some skeptics say that aliens are just a product of science fiction. Neurologist Dr. Stephen Novella argues that the idea is a byproduct of human imagination. The Greys' most distinctive features representing everything that modern humans traditionally link with intelligence. The aliens, however, do not just appear as humans, they appear like humans with those traits we psychologically associate with intelligence. That's the skeptic, Dr. Stephen Novella, in their opinion. What do you think, Brent? Aliens are just in your imagination, and this is what they're saying.
What's that? That aliens are just your imagination?
He said that they're all in your imagination and that people just make up the way they look, and it's just a coincidence that they look the same.
I don't know. It could be a coincidence. I mean, it could be all made up. But, I mean, just everyone, the thousands and thousands of accounts of people seeing these gray aliens, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe that everyone has got a pretty good description on what they saw, and they're all very similar. I mean, they don't really deviate from the same, gray body, big eyes, small nose, and small mouth. It's just very unlikely. I mean, if they were all seeing different things, obviously, it would be different, but it's not. So it kind of makes you wonder what they were really, seeing, or if it was real or not. Obviously, if there's some truth to it, they wouldn't just, fake it.
Mm-hmm. You think so, Nick? That makes no sense that they think that there's a coincidence that all those thousands of people see the same thing.
Well, that theory to me is basically skeptic, or as Stanton Friedman likes to call them, debunkers. They're not skeptics. True skeptics do not make up their mind about something. A true skeptic is agnostic on any given issue. A true skeptic's open-minded and approaches a situation to assess the facts, then they make up their mind. A debunker like this Dr. Novella guy seems to be grasping at straws. He has to create something that sounds maybe remotely positive. Given the fact that people for thousands of years have seen these creatures and have depicted them in all sorts of, like the hieroglyphics, the cave paintings, eyewitness testimony, there's physical crash sites, there's Betty Hill drawing the star map, of which she should have had no idea. I mean, there's so much evidence that flies in the face of that theory that I don't even really want to talk about it. It's absurd.
Yeah.
There's just so much evidence to contradict what that guy has said that it's not even really worth talking about his theory. I mean, I guess you could say that there's something embedded in the human psyche that wishes to project these traits about what we think of as intelligent human beings, but that sounds... I mean, if that's the case, then people with big eyes and long fingers and hairless bodies should be the smartest people on the planet. But, I mean, that's just absurd. I don't know. It's a very, very comical theory. That's my end of discussion opinion on it.
Well, there's some interesting things I was going to mention, because we have about 12 minutes left in the show. I thought I'd take a step back real quick. People are saying that to explain the traits of the gray aliens and how could they exist if they're an alien or an advanced, say it's an advanced alien society. Like, their eyes are said to maybe be that big because wherever their star system is, possibly there's not enough light to take in all at once, so they need the big eyes to take in the little light that does exist. Maybe they rely solely on mind power or mind control, as people say, because in this advanced society or advanced civilization, maybe they have a lot of robotics or maybe they don't need a lot of physical labor. I don't know. You've heard those theories, Brent, right?
Which ones?
Talking about why their eyes are big and things like that.
I haven't really heard that many theories on that, but just more or less where they came from, what they might be here for, is what I've been looking at mostly.
But that would explain why they're gray, though, and they're that weird type of shade of color primarily is maybe because there's not that much light there and they don't get tan, or they don't, I don't know, they don't need it, I guess would be a good way of saying it.
Well, Jeremy, that's probably the most logical theory as to why they're gray and have big eyes. I mean, we just have to look at our own planet for that answer. When scientists have gone miles down deep into the ocean, and when they've gone deep underground in caves, animals are found, like lizards and frogs and salamanders and various types of fish, are found that have very similar skin colors to the grays, and they have big eyes as well. So the fact that the grays are that color and they have big eyes indicate that if they do exist, they probably come from an environment where there's not a lot of light.
Well, I'd hate to use this example, but if you look at nerds, they don't leave the house. They usually have an albino-type skin color, and because they're usually really smart, they don't do a lot of physical labor. They usually have very weak, lengthy type bodies, but they do have high brain power. Maybe it's the same general idea for the grays. I guess that's a lame, easy way to understand what we're trying to say.
That's going to be one of the best analogies I've ever heard of.
Well, Nick, there's something called the mother hypothesis. In 2005, a man named Frederick Malmstrom was writing in Skeptic magazine, said his hypothesis is that grays are actually residual memories of early childhood development. He says that he reconstructs the face of a gray through transformation of a mother's face based on our best understanding of early childhood development and sensation of perception. He says that offer the possible alternative to the existence of grays, the intent instinctive response many people experience when presented with the image of a gray. So basically he's saying that he thinks that it's your residual mind thinking that it's your mom growing up, which is kind of odd.
Wow. That's another grasping for straws theory right there. I think Dr. Novella's theory might have more credibility than that.
Brett believes in that theory.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the type of mental and logical gymnastics that you have to perform to make that theory sound sensible is just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it is what it is. That's all I will say about the really absurd theories. They are what they are, and they're there. And if you want to accept it, you can. If not,
well, an interesting theory, or not theory, something interesting. People are saying, Nick, can you talk a little bit about the grays and how they might exist at military bases or Area 51?
Oh, well, here's an image that is conjured up from old sci-fi movies where the military has gone out and they've captured UFO wreckage, and they've taken alien bodies, dead and alive, from these wrecks, and then they bring them to places like Area 51, and they put them inside a giant tube filled with some goop or something, and they do tests on them and research about, what they're composed of, and basically it's a theory that says we as humans do to them what they do to us. When they crash in their UFOs here on Earth, we gather them and bring them into our research facilities, and we probe them and cut them open and photograph them and do all sorts of tests to try to understand them more.
Well, we do know from at least Roswell, 1947, and the Kingman UFO crash that we do autopsies on these bodies that we recover from these UFO crashes. Just where is the question. Most people say from experience it's either from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio or it's at Area 51. It's what a lot of people say But, of course, we don't know for sure because we're just basing it off of people's stories, and the government's not going to come straight forward and say, look, we got aliens here and here and here, you know?
Yeah.
An interesting story, because we have 5 minutes left, and we're kind of out of theories here, I think, for the time being. But there's a story I heard on the Coast to Coast AM radio show like 10 years ago or whatever. There's a story about a man who apparently a gray alien had killed his dog. He said his dog kind of turned inside out and just disappeared out of nowhere in his front yard one night. So this guy took a boulder and bashed the alien over the head, and it was a gray, of course. And he said that he put this alien in a freezer, like a freezer that you would put hunting carcasses if you shot a deer or something. Well, anyways, so I guess this guy went to bed, and when he woke up, the alien was gone. Like, it got up and left his house, and I guess it ransacked his house, tore it all to pieces. So you remember that story when it first came on and we were telling you about it, Brent?
Yeah, I remember that.
So I wonder what happened to it, or was it wandering around his house while he's sleeping, or did it go back into space, or what happened?
I don't know, man. That's the thing.
You do know. Tell the audience what you know, Brent.
If I did, I would already.
Anyway, we have 3 minutes left in the show. Can you do a quick recap of what we talked about, Nick?
Yeah. Today we talked about what a gray alien is and as to the different theories of where they come from. We basically, gave a physical description at the beginning and proceeded to give the most obvious theory, which is that they're from another galaxy or another solar system. And then we got into some theories that perhaps they are time travelers and that they're really evolved versions of us. We talked about how they might be government-manufactured beings, or they might be manufactured by another alien race. And then we got into some more colorful and unique theories that perhaps they're just mental projections of what we think of our moms as we're growing up. So that basically is a summary of the whole show.
All right, well, we have another show on Saturday at next Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking about the Allagash UFO abduction case as part of our March UFO month here at the Bigfoots Pad Radio Show. Anyways, I guess we will end the show about a minute or two early for this week. I'll let my co-host say their goodbyes, and I guess we'll end this show and put it on the books.
Everybody have a good night.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Between what we see and what we think we know and believe, there are worlds. There are things that we cannot understand. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team is in charge of the field. Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team